Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. It's Way T Lightheart from Bioptimizers with another edition of the Awesome Health Podcast. And today we have a returning guest, Oz Garcia. And of course, if you haven't listened to episode 52, stop the tape right now and go back to it. Or you could just follow with us as we go through the world of biohacking. Of course, Oz Garcia is recognized as a leading authority on age reversal and healthy aging. As a nutritionist to the stars, Oz is the go-to nutritionist for A-list celebrities and Fortune 100 CEOs. His unique and customized approach to nutrition and anti-aging, coupled with more than 40 years of experience, has made Oz one of the most recognizable names in the industry. Even the dogs are excited about it. He's lectured all over the world and has been a pioneer in study of aging. It's all right. The dogs have gone wild. We're biohacking. We're not stopping the tape for anything. His unique and customized approach to nutrition and anti-aging, coupled with more than 40 years of experience, has made Oz one of the most recognizable names in the industry. He has lectured all over the world and has been a pioneer in the study of nutrition and anti-aging. We had an awesome episode last year, and it's so great to have you back on the show. Oz, welcome back.
I'm delighted. Thanks for having me back, Wade.
You know, last episode, and for those who are listening, it's number 52 on the Awesome. You really ought to listen to it because we went into your background as a photographer, kind of in that magical stage of New York that went on,
right.
And how you got interacted with all the A-listers, and then somehow
in the studio 54 days, correct?
Yes, you went from a smoker to a runner to like an anti-aging to now an A-list celebrity guy. How you been doing the last year?
A lot to learn. You know, there's, and I suspect this is true for many people that are listening. Mm-hmm. The shift in value system that I wasn't predicting. So we could talk about that for quite a while, but it became evident to me, certainly as we entered 2021, that there were other things on my mind besides continuing to build out the way that we were building out. What was at the heart of what really mattered? What was it that in the end I could look back and, let's say from myself 10 years from now and say to myself, now I should be doing? So there was a great deal that occurred, and I think most of it occurred in terms of shifting the direction of where I want to take my life, what it is that I want to write about. I entered 2020 writing a book on biohacking, right? Like all the techniques and all the cool stuff, and hanging out with friends of mine like Dave Asprey and Ben Greenfield and Jimmy Quick, and all of us kind of kicking around stuff that I wanted to put into my book. And that idea died somewhere around late fall, 2020, as I began to get, I want to be very careful with this, somewhat more mindful, somewhat more spiritual, and I don't mean religious, I mean seriously, spending a lot of time at home as we were all in lockdown here, meditating more, spending more time with the different tools that allow me to dive a little bit deeper within myself. And so my whole perspective shifted. Where I'm at now, I'm actually amazed at what I was thinking going into 2020 and where I'm at, like 1/3 of the way into 2021.
That you bring up a great point. And I think, of course, when last time we talked, we were just in the starting stages of the whole, what I call not the pandemic response.
That's right.
And I think there's a clear distinction that needs to be made there. Is the pandemic didn't shut down everything. The unelected officials who influenced their government decided to influence their elected officials to shut everything down. Let's be clear about that etymology. And as biohackers and people who are health advocates, I find it fascinating that most of my friends in the field are really shocked and horrified how little public information was distributed to people about the positive things that people can do to enhance their immune system. So I always found it funny that gyms and churches are closed, but fast food restaurants and liquor stores and you know, I live here off of Abbot Kinney in Venice, and you know, we can't go to a restaurant, but there's a lineup out the door for MedMen. and,
Sure.
And you can buy booze at the liquor store that's open down the street, but I can't go to church.
Well, these were things that began to show up on, I'd say, the horizon of what's really going on here. You know, not only in terms of the poor public bureaucratic response, governmental response to your point. And then beyond that, the more local responses themselves, certainly here in New York City. And, you know, we were at the heart of things going, you know, terribly wrong right at the beginning. And then beyond that, how unprepared we were for what's occurred. I didn't even know that there's a department of studying pandemics in the federal government. And they're really tough. They've got some of the top research scientists and geneticists up there. I didn't find out about it until I listened to a Peter Attia podcast during the summer with the leading guy that's been predicting and screaming from the rafters for 10 years, there's a pandemic about to come. So it opened up my eyes in large measure to the fact that many of us are just oblivious to what's really happening in terms of, let's say, all these viruses, what's now being predicted going forward. And it should be public policy. Politicians should be talking about how do you prepare for something like this, maybe something even worse. You know, if it all goes in the way that I suspect it'll likely go, we're going to have a transitional period, and I suspect you may think this too, where we wind up somewhat better, right? And certainly better prepared in terms of how we deal with these catastrophic events. But our thinking too should be better adapted to a less commercial world.
You bring up a lot of wonderful points and some things to flesh out, which seems kind of odd from a health perspective, but when your life becomes transformed in the way that people's lives have been transformed, and I'm not talking about the people who have gotten the virus or lost their lives or dealing with complications from it. I'm talking for everyone else who has maybe survived it, transcended from it, or didn't get it, or whatever it happens to be. And we're still, we still don't know what 18 months looks like, or 2 years looks like, or 3
That's
years
correct, yes.
like. And they're talking about mutant strains, and then we have mRNA that's in the
That's
vaccines. Right. We don't know, that's never been used in vaccines before. We don't know what the potential consequences of that. We don't have long-term studies. So there is an incredible amount of unknowns. And when people are facing unknowns, oftentimes there's two types of people. There's people that are like myself, which are very good and comfortable dealing with high levels of uncertainty. And there's a lot of people who aren't.
Well, I would agree with you. I'd probably say that in the vast majority of people, we're a certain kind of animal. We're a certain kind of primate that requires a very high degree of certainty, likely for the purposes of survival. 50,000 years ago, if you were walking through a savanna and you kind of looked up while you were looking for something to eat, and you saw off in the distance the weeds rustle, you wanted to have some certainty as to whether there was something there that wanted to have you for lunch, or it was the wind. Mm-hmm. Right? So built into our nervous system, built into our ability to defend ourselves, is some need to know what's going on. You know, do I stay? Do I keep picking berries? Or do I get out of here and grab the kids, and find a safe spot? Now you move forward to the postmodern world that you and I live in, and you're talking to yourself in your head. The mechanism that wants to know is still hardwired and baked into all of us. So when you don't know and you're talking to yourself in your head, there's a lot more anxiety, to your point, a lot more fear. Now, very few people can embrace ambiguity, can embrace mystery. They got to know, I got to know it now. There's the immediacy button. And I think that's just, an evolutionary leftover appendage. And nobody can reflect on that. Very few people can reflect on that.
It's a great point. To that, I remember years ago, and it's going to lead to your point about the spiritual side of things, is I had studied the efforts of mystics and their role and goal in life, and became a passion of mine, which I'm still involved in today to a great deal, maybe more so than my day job. And one of the things was this aspect of the traveling yogi that would never stay in the same spot for more than 2 weeks. And anybody that's been on a trip knows when you first arrive in a new place, you're picking up more things, you're not sure where the area is, and there's a certain amount of anxiety and stress that's built into moving. And so I realized, a lot of people don't know this, and I don't think I've ever told this story, but I literally did not live in the same place for 13 years. I wanted to experience being in this continual state of movement. So I'd go here for a while, I'd get used to the place, I'd move there. And I didn't do the 2-week thing like a lot of yogis do, or 3 days or whatever it happens to be. It would be a couple of months here, a couple of months there.
Sure.
And there was a pace, I can remember specifically when I would arrive in a new place and I didn't feel the threat response system. And I went, oh, that's what that's for.
Got it. Well, also, on the other side, on the flip side of the coin, you've got courage. We have tolerance. We have excitement, anticipation. So that can offset. Certainly, if you're strong and you're really strong, that those practices can reign over the ones that are debilitating. Getting scared. We scare easy. We're the kind of primate or animal that you go boo and people lose it. And then there's this capacity that certain individuals have to invent themselves in the ways that they do, probably some genetics thrown in there, and they get great thrills. They're in flow states when they're doing what you're doing. I was like that when I was a lot younger.
Right.
Now that I'm where I'm at, I like stability a lot more. But I remember doing the same thing, picking a spot to go, fly, getting off with a backpack, and just being a wanderer and loving it.
Well, this leads me to the next thing, because I think a lot of people's responses to this whole situation has been very fear-based. And at a certain point, you got to get on with your life. And we're kind of at that point where, either through people's confidence in the vaccination, or people just saying, the heck with it, I want to live my life, or I'm just frustrated or whatever, and stripping away all the politicization, which I don't know why everything's been politicized. Not everything's political, but everything seems to be politicized these days.
I would agree.
What have you been, because you have such a interesting group of clientele who are, interested in high performance, but of course they're subjected to a massive amount of anxiety. What have you been suggesting for people through the process, and maybe what you've done? And then what was the unexpected results? Because you said there was a transformation that happened for you. Sure. So I'd like to kind of unwind that a little bit since the last time we talked.
I think that you gotta be involved. You have to keep your mind growing. You do have to stay in a process where you're improving, like James Clear would say, about 1% per day, so that you're not consumed by your fear and your anxiety only. Activity and action will take apart anxiety. So if you have curiosity, if you can work on your passion, then, and I'm not saying this like platitudes, but I'm being very, very frank. There's got to be some way that your day is set up so that you're moving through any number of things that are preparing you and disarming the tendency to go overboard, to go into anxiety, right? And you'll hear from many people, certainly clients of mine and friends, how they've used the time creatively, constructively. Their lives have taken completely different directions. Some have even moved out of the country, and I never would have believed it, and discovered other things to do with their life that never would have happened. For me, becoming a blogger and writing now almost every day, which is something that I wanted to do, and having an office set up where I've got all my writing materials and everything is prepared for me to start getting in there and doing my book, and days would go by and I just wouldn't do it. During the pandemic, I actually began to sit down and journal, and I think that that's probably one of the more important things that we can do. There are any number of journals available. 5-minute journal is one of my favorites. You can do it either on an app. I think Ryan Holiday, who's probably one of the leading thinkers in Stoicism, and I know you probably have great admiration for him. He just came out with this fantastic journal that has a Stoic saying every day that you have to answer. And it kind of sets you up, or using Sam Harris's app, Waking Up, so that you start your day, kind of like in a thoughtful place, like instead of being preoccupied in the way that we all are, certainly after the first cup of coffee, kind of like, well, that's something I think I should be thinking about today. And in that way, what you're finding is that you've actually become more authentic within the period of time that you invested in reinventing yourself over and over. So I don't think I would be thinking the way that I'm thinking today had this not occurred. There are certainly other ways that we could have learned many of these lessons. Did we have to go into the bowels of despair and get a pandemic in order to discover that what I really want in life is peace of mind, not another 100 grand or another million or another billion, and whether or not Madison Avenue is open or not. That somebody actually said that to me. I can't go shopping. I can't remember what was last summer or not. All the shops are closed, and I'm like, wow, really? Like when does it get back to normal? Well, what exactly are we looking to define here when we're talking about normal and happiness and fulfillment and satisfaction and so on?
I think you bring up a good point in this idea of normal. And of course, in the biohacking community, that's like something that's just like a bad word. No one wants to be normal. We want to be super optimized and healthy and high performance and bulletproof and all those wonderful superlatives. Right. And we see this theme in the last maybe 5 to 10 years of an expansion of like the superhero image throughout movies and all of this, and these icons of people who can transcend all the anxieties of the world of a highly advancing technological society.
Right.
But what you're really talking about here is, in order to make that leap in a way that's going to be fulfilling, if I don't want to put your words in your mouth, but it seems like you're saying there's some other things about the human condition that we have to work out other than my parameters on my blood pressure and my lean body mass tissue and how much deep sleep that I got last night, which are all well and relative indicators of what I would say quantitative performance wellness. But what you're
my ordering on.
Yeah, you're talking, let's talk about qualitative aspects.
Exactly.
Let's get into that, because I think that's where we're really going here. What's beyond the numbers? What's beyond the tokens of success or achievement or accomplishment or self-value or all of that, which it's very easy to get caught up in? Where is this taking you, and why is that so important and so enlightening?
There's a couple of ways I'm going to answer it. I think one is peace of mind. So that's not something that comes to a person's mind right away. Right. So the way that the culture appears to be set up, having been around now 70 years, is from my observation, go to school, go to the right high school, go to the right university, marry the right person, have the right amount of kids, make sure that you've got the right career track or career path. And beyond that, there are people that may invest in other aspects of growth, but many don't. So what we find is a lot of sadness in people. You know, if you scratch the surface of many of them, among the wealthiest, what you'll find is how much suffering is stuffed in their bodies. So they missed the point. They got the kids, they got the wife, they got the car, they got the money, you know, they've got the public image. But what they're missing is a fundamental aspect of what it means to be alive before you die, which is, was this meaningful? Did I get peace of mind? Am I happy? And these are fundamental and critical questions.
I used to call it, when I was a personal trainer back in Vancouver, I was dealing with a lot of the who's who in Vancouver. And I remember people would come to me to get fit or whatever, and they had everything in life. And they'd say, well, you know, I used to say to them in our introductory session, I said, well, getting you fit is relatively easy. It's about you committing to what I'm going to provide for you, and there's going to be an outcome. I said, but where the real question is going to be working together. And I said, is determining what you think that you're going to gain from being in that condition. What do you think the payoff is? And what I discovered is most of the people I were dealing with what you identified, the golden handcuffs of success. And, you know,
I like that.
In a lucid moment, they'd say, like, I can remember one major executive of a multinational corporation who was one of the top executives of the year, great guy, beautiful family. And I said, what do you really think? And he says, I keep having this reoccurring dream that I want to build a boat in Indonesia, and I can just see me going out into the water. But then when I build this little boat, it sinks. This is this recurring theme, right? And it struck me. And then another one of my clients, who I'm still in contact with a lot of these, they're becoming great. His whole business was family business, very successful, completely transformed. He hasn't been able to go to work, lost millions and millions of dollars, you know, still uncertainty. But he's now biking with his kids. He built the gym in his house. He's training with his family. His kids he beat the generational dysfunction around health. And he says, you know, I don't want to go back to my old life. I'm really happy. So is that what you're talking about?
Absolutely. That kind of nails it in large measure. Look, we all need to be fit. We all need to eat in a particular manner. You and I recognize that there are habits and practices, from intermittent fasting to the use of certain supplementation, how it is that we sleep, being very clear of the quality of the sleep that we get. And you and I could, you know, drill down any one of those for a complete show, right? That there's just so much there. But it used to be that I was looking at any one of these things to embellish my public image. You know, I'm a great marathoner, the celebrity nutritionist to the stars, as though any of that mattered, right? And what I'm finding out is, yes, I want to be fit, so long as it's moving me towards a certain amount of peace of mind. Do I get 4% out of that, 8%, 10%? If I skip dinner and I do intermittent fasting, does it give me a little bit more peace of mind? If I'm doing my meditations, how much more is that going to give me? So that you can wake up and be at peace with any number of things in your life, where you're not losing it for the smallest things that affect people on a regular basis. Having angry outbursts over absolutely nothing, and being caught up in immediacy, the concerns of what do I need to do now to stabilize myself, instead of putting in the long haul work that will get you there, in a year, 2, 3, and so on. Some people have actually figured it out. Like this guy, they got the money, they got the circumstances, and they recognize that they can actually retreat from the world and examine their value system. Maybe go hang out at some sort of ashram for a while. With Jack Kornfeld in Northern California, and doing of Vipassana for 10 days or a month, and what will come of that for you? So I think that these ways of thinking, even though they sound a bit woo-woo, actually make you much more capable of being in the world now with the circumstances that we're dealing. How tough do you need to be? You got to be really tough to get through these times. You have to have an immense amount of grit. You need to deal with circumstances that are, in large measure, almost impossible to confront. And so what I'm proposing is contemplation in the ways that you and I are talking right now, that will allow you to live through this without losing your SHIT along the way.
So you're sitting at your desk, you're going to write the new biohacking book. You're sitting
Right.
the days are going by. You're not writing and going. What triggered the light bulb and the pivot, or this kind of activation of maybe a deeper aspect of yourself that was always there, but the circumstances are kind of bringing it up to flourish? Would you say that it's probably something that's been inside of you for a long time?
Oh yeah, you just read my mind.
Yeah.
I think, I've already authored 4 books. One was a New York Times bestseller. I've had that success, and without realizing it, you're kind of looking for it again. Until the circumstances change. What was invisible remained invisible. Why am I doing this book exactly? Do I want to stay competitive, or do I want to make a difference? So now what I'm looking at is I certainly want to make a difference. I got a long way to go in terms of dealing with other aspects of my character that I still think I need to work on, as we all do. But man, this process with the pandemic accelerated events. Certainly accelerated events, Wade.
So at what point did you go, I need to go in this direction?
Oh, I think during the summer, as business was changing, the one-on-one obviously wasn't going to continue, not in the form that it was in. And with a lot more time to myself, kind of figuring it out. There are people who I love. There's, I would say they're mentors. Reading a lot more, all of a sudden going from a book a month to like a book a week, which was my habit for years, and filling my brain up with other people's remarkable thinking, and going, does what you have to say in terms of a biohacking book going to really be a satisfying experience? And look at the struggle you're having, probably because it wasn't an authentic expression of who I was, right? Or what I wanted to put into the world, like, hey, rock star, biohacking book.
Right.
Right. So that, I think during the summer, that flip, and I do recall points where what I started doing was just beginning to journal. And once the journaling began, and it started to go intensively, then I started to write essays. And the essays were almost like writing a journal. And what was coming out was completely unexpected. Like I was channeling some sort of entity from another universe. And I found that to be very meaningful.
Beautifully put and said, and well done. And I think something that we can all take from develop perspective. I know in my own life, I've made some pivots, maybe not to the same extent. What were your support mechanisms, I would say, that you were drawing from? Because oftentimes, I think it was the Russians who actually came up to the conclusion with deep psychological testing that it wasn't fear of death that was the ultimate fear, it was the fear of loss of identity. And I think one of the big things that when you're as successful as you are, or you're known as whatever it happens to be, whether that's a A-lister or a top executive or an entertainer, whatever it happens to be,
Sure.
And you see this happening with people who retire. They lose their sense of identity, and
Correct.
it can be devastating. And I think there's a lot of identities that were challenged in this current situation. Like, you don't see your colleagues at work, you don't go to that job, maybe your restaurant didn't work out, or what happened, all these sort of things which are associated, come part and parcel with the physiology, right? There's an avatar or a conversation in our head that's associated with what we do. When you meet people, well, what do you do, right?
You take out your wallet and you show them that you have a Black American Express card, and
yes.
and you introduce your ambassador to them.
Yes.
Your public self. Let me show you who I am. Really, that's really you.
Yeah, Chris Rock.
And then they move in with you, and regret it. Like, how do I get out of this mess?
Chris Rock said when people are dating, he said, you don't meet the person you're dating, you meet their representative.
Oh, of course. I mean, the history of public and private lives, of kings, of emperors, of people that lived during the Middle Ages, what went on for them, what goes on for anybody today. But we have a culture where there's a very sharp divide between public and private self. And many of us work to embellish the public self as much as we can, right? And a lot of work goes into it, a lot of effort for many people. I think for some people, the challenge, when the public self is challenged, they don't deal with it that well at all. We could look at criminal events like what occurred with Madoff. How many individuals have built up their whole public image around the fact that they were connected to Madoff, and they all committed suicide. Lost fortunes, public identities, wound up being criminalized themselves. So how much money do you need to be happy? Is one more billion going to do it for you when you already have 45 billion? I'm listening now to a case involving a very well-known fund leader, and they're probably manage about half a billion dollars. $449 billion a year, half a trillion in funds, and the guy doesn't seem to be all that happy at all. Going through a case now and being removed from certain boards, and I could be happy, with a fraction, 0.0001% of that amount of money, and many people that study happiness, that are invested in the neurochemistry of it, would tell you, past a certain amount of money, you don't get an increase in happiness. Right?
I think it's 150,000 it tops out.
You're right.
There was some
right.
study. studies done about it's the increased level of happiness. It's 75 to 150 is the sweet spot.
You're
Obviously,
correct.
depending where you are. New York's probably 150 for sure, just with the expense, as opposed to like, you know, where I'm from, Moncton, New Brunswick, Canada, we're 75. Man, you're living large.
Sure.
So in this renaissance, or the it seems like this cocooning or the winter that society has experienced, and maybe in your own pursuits that you're seeing this change, but it's giving forth this blossoming effort. What did you do? How did you embrace this? And who are the people that you leaned on to say, hey, you know what? Did you have people that you're talking to? It's like, hey, you know what? I'm thinking I'm stepping away a little bit from this biohacking book. I'm kind of going into this more intuitive, meditative, spiritual kind of space.
You know, I have one dear friend who's also a good coach, and we've been around each other for decades. And he has a house out by the beach in Eastern Long Island. So we spent a lot of time out there talking and sharing back and forth, kind of the way that we're doing right now. Yeah, but you could spend a weekend, or I'd stay out there for a week, and the conversations with him were critical. Kind of the mentor that you would love to have. Very successful, wonderful family, wonderful children, and at this point, inventing his life in ways that he never would have thought. So that was really, really key for me in terms of my thinking. I think I throw myself into courses often. I love the work of Stephen Kotler and the Flow Collective, and to get online every day and spend an hour or two where you're examining certain things and pushing yourself to see the world from a whole other perspective, like okay, let me look at it from this point of view. I think eventually you take on multiple points of view, kind of like a circus acrobat that has all those poles with different plates on them, and your job is to keep them all up in the air. At least that's his job, and not drop it. And you can find that you can hold multiple points of view on anything, and if you're good, you can shift. But the point is, what's the lesson learned in any one of those, right? And what do you take back? What are you going to give back into the world, right? And what you want to do is get stronger out of these kinds of inquiries or studies. And I don't mean stronger necessarily like this, but stronger in terms of...
define that's what you mean by strength, because strength, I think, it comes in a lot more forms than physical brute strength. There's different types of strength.
I think that what the world requires of us now is to be very well prepared, very well equipped to think on our feet in ways that probably before we weren't thinking about it. I think the resilience required right now. I mentioned grit before. I forget who the author is of that particular book. You know, but throwing yourself into the kind of process, possibly a partial process that I'm in, and I know that you're probably in too, is being an equivalent match to what's happening, so that you're not scared, right? That at core what you have is a certain degree of tranquility, and you can look out at what's going on and be able to think about it, you know, not freak out about it. You know, can I think about this? You know, so do you want to go do a workshop, you know, a course? Go do that. Whatever it is that's going to shake you up from the rumination and the worry and the regrets and what I could have done, and you know what's going to happen. Like can you shut that down long enough? You know what Kotler would call, you know, being in a flow state and be here, right? And then you kind of lose your way periodically, because we are human after all. But for the most part, be able to be here, use your thinking capacity, to actually, like I said before, face the world on its terms right now. Everything that we've experienced. It's been a hell of a year.
So what are you writing about these days? What has been these essays that you've been putting out to the world, and also probably people want to know where they'll find them. We'll get all that stuff, but like what's got your juices flowing now?
Literally everything we're talking about. You know, this is going to wind up being one of the blogs. Mainly what I do is I post on Medium, on medium.com, and obviously on Instagram. But Medium's become my favorite go-to place right now. And I'll just pull out my phone and start writing and post an essay. So in that regard, you know, this is fodder. Like I'm already thinking, okay, so I just talked to Wade, and this is what came up. Oh, that didn't occur to me earlier. And then work it tonight for a couple of hours, and then have an essay pop out of it on the other side. You know, this is very rewarding what you and I are doing right now, right? And not that it takes me away from the fear, but it actually contributes to my peace of mind and stability. And many people wouldn't think of it in that way.
I was listening recently to Dr. Jordan Peterson outlining
Yes.
where he's been for the last couple of years and the living hell that he's been going through after a physical addiction to benzodiazepines, which is
And his wife having
very,
cancer.
it's a horrible situation. And he was describing it, I think, to Eric Weinstein the other day.
Wow.
And they were having a conversation, and he was explaining it takes him about 5 hours.
Was it on Rebel Wisdom or the intellectual dark web?
It was on, I think, the Dark Horse podcast, and then they did an exchange, and I forget which one he was actually allocating what his day looks like, and it's horrific. Is it like
I gotta find this. Forget writing a journal tonight. I gotta listen to this.
They're beautiful.
I mean, Eric Weinstein is one of my favorite. Gotta listen to people in the world. What a brain on that guy's head.
Yeah, both of them, Eric and Brett.
Oh, Jordan too. I mean,
yeah, and Jordan was talking about he just came out with his book, Beyond Order. His first one was 12 Rules for Life, and then
I enjoyed it a lot.
12 more rules, and it's a very interesting contradiction, because the first book was about order, and then second book is about chaos, and he's been very mischaracterized about it. But one of the things, and I'm getting to this, what you're writing about, that I think he talked about the importance of writing, and that it refines one's thoughts in a way that you can re-examine. So his book, Maps of Meaning, he said he edited that book
10 years.
Yeah.
10 years.
Each line 50 times.
Yeah, 10 years.
So as you've collected, as most people in our industry would say, you've been to the top of the mountain, so to speak. You know, the New York Times bestseller, that's it. You're known, A-list celebrity. You're living in New York.
Got a lot of chicks.
You got marble floors on the walls. I mean, it's great. And to listen to you talk about this, which I think is so meaningful, because you don't need all those things in order to develop meaning out of your life. And the meaning that you develop out of your life is what really accentuates the quality. What aspects have you been refining in your thinking process, in you as an expression, as a human, as a biohacker, as a being, as a creative artist, which you are, all of those things? What has emerged during this writing? Because I think I want to inspire people about unlocking aspects that they might have forgotten about, that has been buried with them for decades, maybe their whole life.
And now for a Bioptimizers fixed digestion tip: supercharge your protein shake. Everyone knows protein shakes are a great way to sneak in extra protein, build more muscle, even replace meals and burn more fat. The problem is the highest quality protein typically absorbs at around 40%. One way to fix this and dramatically increase how quickly and effective your protein shake digests is to add 2 to 3 capsules of Masszymes into your shake. One research study showed that pre-digested protein during a meal increased muscle growth significantly. To take advantage of this, just blend the open capsules into your shake, and within 15 minutes or less, the enzymes will have begun to break down the protein into amino acids. This can make your shakes at least 2 to 3 times more potent. Some people do this and sip on their shake while lifting to provide their muscles with a steady stream of amino acids during their workout. To save 10% on Masszymes, use the code SHAKE10, that's SHAKE10, at Masszymes.com. That's SHAKE10 at Masszymes.com.
I think this totally caught me by surprise. The writing itself, unlike writing books in the ways that I have before, which was intended to get a product out, make money on it, embellish my public self. Right now, based on the fact that I'm studying with different writers, again, like Stephen Kotler and so on, the very fact that I'm writing, and it could be about anything, doing a stupid 5-minute journal, what are you grateful for today? Write down 3 things. I'm like, walk my dog to the corner and back. It's like, you read this like a week or 2 later, and you laugh out loud at the little things that you're grateful for, right? And then if I work in Ryan Holiday's book and I get a stoic commentary that I need to comment on, something else will come of that. And for some reason, once I started doing the journaling and then the essay writing, I found that, I hope I'm answering this properly, that I'm loving writing. And I forgot that.
Yes.
Right. So even as we're talking, there's an urge to actually go write. Right. And that wasn't there a year ago. Hasn't been there for a very long time.
Do you think that our increasing, we live in a world of consumption. And so when people are looking at a video, looking at their phone, looking at a text, looking at that sort of stuff, to me, I'm looking at is, okay, I am entering into a consumptive process. And do you believe that technology has been so good at stimulating our need, or I hate the word of need, our desire maybe, or our drives to consume, that we've forgotten our ability to produce, or the necessity of it?
If you take a kid, if you take a 4 or 5-year-old kid and put them in front of a TV set and let them watch what they want, and you've got on the other end, coming at the kid's brain, right, a little 1.5 pound brain, which will eventually turn into a 2-pound brain that you and I have, you would hope, right? They're being bombarded with an immense amount of commercial garbage that's intended to neutralize their ability to exhibit common sense. So if you've got a food industry, a junk food industry that's got 100 billion to burn, what capacity does a 1.5 pound brain have against that? And so if you go into a Publix in Florida, nothing wrong with shopping there, but it isn't intended for people to shop healthy. It's these shopping carts that are 2-3 times what a shopping cart was when I was growing up, right? And they're intended to be filled to the top, and people are pushing these things, and I know it's because they're being exposed to the worst information about what to buy to take care of themselves. So I think it becomes more difficult unless you're working on educating yourself. And I think that's critical. I think you need to read. I think you need to read a lot. I think writing is important. And I think you need to expand your curiosity so that you don't wind up being a consumer hooked on dopamine every time that something pops up and you got to buy it so you can get dopamine hit. Dopamine hit, like a little mouse in a labyrinth. that gets cheese at the end, plus dopamine.
Funny you should say that, because I had this, I'm going to share another strange
Sure.
thought that I've been having, because I have been running a considerable amount of thought experiments during this process. I do through my meditation process, I do a little bit of writing, and then I kind of get in I'll interview and talk to people because it's one of my forms. And then I'll sit there on a Saturday evening or something, and I start contemplating and running an experiment. And I'd like to get your opinion on this, because
Sure.
it's related to this rat in the maze. And I thought,
Oh, okay.
we know that mathematical algorithms and artificial intelligence are driving a great amount of the distribution of information on the web. And we know that most of the brokers of that information, and I would have to say that I'm one of those people doing this
Okay.
podcast, we're contributing to this. We're sharing information in the hope to capture the attention of the reader,
Sure.
and eventually offer what we feel is valuable for them, and they do a fair and reasonable exchange for that. But then I got thinking about this, because there's a lot of these behaviors that I'm seeing elicited in the public that seem self-destructive, that seem to be moving people not into an upward trend,
Right.
with the anabolic responses, but in a catabolic, negative cascade of effects that lead to disease, dysfunction, distress, all depression, all of those. And I got thinking, well, how much of intelligence has artificial intelligence taken over? And it seems that the product of it right now is division. People are divided by race. People are divided by economics. People are divided by politics. People are divided by sex. People are divided by... It just seems like the end result of everything is division and chaos. And
Seems like it.
And I got a couple books over here. I've got Alexander Solzhenitsyn's The Gulag Archipelago.
Remarkable.
I've got The Art of War by Sun Tzu.
Remarkable.
Right? And I'm looking at Art of Sun Tzu, and I'm looking at his book, and I'm like, this looks frighteningly familiar with the strategy. And I'm like, has artificial intelligence simply figured out a way to keep the rats hitting the pellet on the button? And is that unintended, or is it intended by either individuals within the state or individuals outside of the state who are not acting in our best interest? And how does one overcome that in either situation? Because neither one's a good one.
Some of this is going to sound a little cliched, and people have heard enough of it. The fact that Facebook can manipulate people's thinking in the ways that they do, and they're only getting better at it. And as they incorporate greater aspects of artificial intelligence and can glean greater data about you, how much more you're a meat puppet, on any of the big tech companies' hooks, right? So I don't think it's an easy answer. You got people like Peter Diamandis, who writes a lot about the future, and he has Singular University and what it is that they're thinking there. And it seems like a more benign future will come if you're listening to him, right? And there are people that are interested in that kind of future. Bill Gates' new book, I think, is terrific. Everybody ought to read this thing. And
what is the book that you're referring to?
That's the one on the climate crisis right now. It's his latest book, Bill Gates' latest book right now. Can't recall the title offhand.
He's now the largest farm owner in America.
I think he was asked that in an interview about the book. Just the fact that people are thinking about a benign future, I think is good for you and for me. And that so much seems to be getting reinvested back into making this a better planet. I was listening today on NPR radio how the Chinese, because they are driven by science primarily, I think the analysts call them good Stalinists, Leninists. They're going to fall behind science, and they're seeing that burning coal is catastrophic, not really for the world, but for them. They're actually beginning to dismantle many coal burning destinations, and will likely phase out the use of coal soon enough, right? So there you've got a different kind of ethic that's moving you along. They don't really care about the rest of the world. You and I are highly empathetic individuals, and there's a lot on our minds in terms of what's going to make for a better future overall. And let's see if we win. Let's see if we win against climate change and the forces of evil. And we could talk about that for another hour or two.
So going back to that, because, writing, you're kind of interacting with the digital medium, but you're not really caught within it. Do you have a strategy for navigating that, what I would call the razor's edge between leveraging the digital world in a way to get your thoughts, your feelings, and that which empathizes to the human condition, versus being caught as the rat in the AI dopamine trap?
It's doing it. You gotta have this vocabulary. If you're not if this isn't on your mind, if you're not thinking about what you're thinking about, you got a problem.
Okay. That's stage one. If you're not thinking about, well, you're probably not watching this. You're probably like searching TikTok videos or something.
Correct. And if you're not, like I said, if you've not laid out certain things that now I think are important. I didn't think it was so important when I was 40 to meditate. Naropa, who's going to go there? I'm going to put on, my running shorts, my sneakers, and blow out, half a marathon. That's what you got to do. And be, a tough New Yorker. So I had certain sensibilities. And I wish I could go back and talk to that person, back in the 1990s, but here we are. So it's about cultivating now, I think, mindfulness, and I think that's a big subject matter in and of itself.
Well, this gives me another thing that I occur, because I have the great fortune of working with a great group of people at my company, Bioptimizers, young, motivated, enthusiastic, digitally savvy people who are working the different aspects that it takes for a company to survive in the current culture. And
this made me think something. Remind me.
Yeah, and I feel like I'm kind of almost the apologetic geezer that walks in and says, the way we used to do things, and recognizing that I grew up in a world without the internet, without constant contact, without telephones, without text messaging, without social media, without YouTube. We had to read a book, and in the action of reading a book, you manufacture, it's kind of like a guideline, but you're manufacturing the story. And almost anyone that's read a book would see the movie that the book was made. And that's not the way I envisioned it, I think the only guy that ever got it right was Peter Jackson in the Tolkien books. But
there you go.
They were so explicit, there was no room for error. Do you think that the younger generation today, the internet generation, the people that have grown up, lived on this, have always had GPS maps, have always had the internet, what would you see as their advantages, and what would you see as their disadvantages in cultivating a practice of mindfulness, in a sea of chaotic interruptions?
I think that if you're paying attention to being authentic, I think if you're paying attention to being sincere, transparent, then life goes a lot easier for you and for everybody. If you're not caught up in generating a public image, you're going to generate some. It's almost impossible not to. But if you're aware of what's going on, then what you have, then what's going on is you're moving through the world already contemplative, already being able to make a contribution, and understanding the role of being well educated. And I don't mean by, by going to Harvard. So, doing reading in the ways that you and I are talking about. So I can see how you can get into your office, and a lot of these young people give you joy if indeed this is what's on their mind. And I found that to be true, and to my own joy, that this person's really authentic, and if authenticity matters to you, then you can smell it. And you and I have been around long enough that when somebody's looking to um, uh, you and me, it's toxic. You feel it.
Right.
I heard somebody recently speak about that. Um, Somebody who's a scientist, a neuroscientist, and talking about gut feelings. And there's enough literature about that. And Malcolm Gladwell has written about it in a number of his books. But that's what you want. As little toxicity around you, no matter what the generation is, and the smell of authenticity and sincerity, always the best way to go.
Well, I think that brings us, we can kind of dive in a little bit into the biohacking aspect of that.
Sure.
And I think that's really important. I've just been, one of the things that I thought I would do while I've been on somewhat pause everything, although my company's done very well, is being in the health industry in a digital base has been a good thing in this, and that's almost embarrassingly so. But I've just engaged in a massive barrage of tests. And I was thinking about, I like to think kind of on broad spectrums of how we can make the most impact as a company. And then I was considering, all these people in the loss of microbiome diversity due to dietary habits. And we're seeing all these people with all these food restrictions and strange responses to various foods and dietary practices becoming increasingly complex.
Yes.
For a lot of people. My question is, do you feel that having an optimized microbiome is essential in order to navigating an increasingly complex world, because it gives you that BS meter, if you will?
Absolutely. Okay. If you look at most mammals, elephants, other primates, giraffes, whatever, water beasts, even birds, hummingbirds, they'll go out of their way to look for fermented foods, right? So rotted fruit that's hit the ground and spoiled, elephants will eat that and get additional probiotics, right? All the way up to you and me, right? And so much of the microbiome is decimated, and along with that, your brain, your thinking, your moods, the connection between our microbiome, our immune system, our ability to think well, our ability to actually regulate our moods and our temperament better, are in large measure driven by what's found in our colon, right? And so replacing almost on a daily basis probiotics is critical. And to have, the kind of knowledge that you would provide and the kind of products that are excellent. You don't want to get your probiotics from Yoplait.
Yeah, everything has probiotics. I saw
like Yoplait with probiotics. Like, really?
Probiotics, right? Wait until they have
56 grams of sugars. Oh,
yeah.
okay.
Yeah, or a whiskey shot with probiotics or something. So what are some of the practices that you do in order to, maintain that cognitive clarity in a world of anxiety? Maybe you can walk us through maybe a day in the life of, how you would start your day, because as being the pinnacle, and then maybe take us backwards, maybe where someone else who isn't hasn't cultivated all the practices that you have, where they would start.
Sure. I think so. I'm going to give you what you want, and people can kind of cherry pick from there, right? Sure. And this is my practices. I've worked on and developed over many years. I think it began with the discipline of being a long distance runner, and whatever got into me back in the 70s to run a marathon, that kind of disciplined way of being has served me very well. That doesn't mean I don't go off the ranch from time to time. I'm hardly a goody-goody, right? So the day has to start off in a certain manner. I stopped listening to the news a long time ago. I rarely read the papers. I may listen to NPR when I get up for a few minutes as I'm yawning, going to the bathroom, stuff like that. And then it's music. So I love classic jazz that goes on right away. And then I come into the kitchen. I either make a smoothie or a beverage. And I lay out the supplementation that I'm going to use. I use a lot of nootropics. For those that are listening that don't know, these are nutrients, if you can call them that actually maximize how well your brain works. So I'm a big fan of different kinds. Again, depending on what it is I'm looking for that day.
Right, because a lot of people don't realize that the different nootropics combinations lead to different brain states. And I think nootropics are kind of, for the uneducated or unexperienced, they're kind of put as, oh, I'm just going to be smarter. But some create focus, some create verbal fluency, others are more creative, or
exactly.
Yes.
So in that regard, I'm working with my nootropics, the things that I would say fight aging, and by that I mean decrepitude. So that I'm real clear that my battery pack's going to run out at some point that I'm out of here, right? Right. The wishful thinking that we have when we're in our 20s. It's fascinating how you think at this point. But what I want the high degree of functionality. How do I maintain my muscle mass? How do I maintain my appearance in ways that, all us vain human beings will exhibit, but without being grotesque about it. So they're very
functionally vain, we'll call it. Let's call that.
There you go. Naturally vain, right? Yes. And that's how I begin my morning. So I'll have these kind of secret potions. NAD for sure. I think your listeners would want to know. I think a great deal of. So I use NAD. That also goes into my IVs whenever I get those done. We'll talk about that in a moment. Yep. After that, I do probably about 45 minutes of meditation and deep breathing. And that served me really well as I've gotten older. Since there are no gyms, I've got kind of like my own home TRX, my own home Equinox, all that kind of stuff. So I'll do a workout probably for about another 45. So the morning itself is almost 3 hours that I'm dedicating to my body.
What time do you get up? What time do you get up?
About 5:30, 6 a.m.
So you get up and get after it, right after it. Do you take your newts before? We use newts at the company. Do you take your nootropics before you do your meditation and breathing?
Yeah, I do.
And then you do that, and then you do the shake, and then you do the workout?
That's correct.
Right. So you don't eat before the meditation, but after. No. Right. Okay.
That's why typically I have a beverage that has everything from tyrosine to oat straw. There's a whole bunch of stuff that goes in there that, along with nootropic powders, I'll put anandamide in there, and it winds up being like some mad scientist beverage, but you feel terrific.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one. I get it.
Levels that are coming that I know are going to come on in 10 minutes, with some are going to come on in about an hour or two. So again, the years of experimenting kind of already given me the primer for this. Once I've done all of that, I may do an ice bath or an ice shower, depending on how much time I got. So I'll run down to Walgreens, get 40 pounds of ice into the tub, fill it up about 1/3 of the way, in I go and I'll soak, depending on what my mood is, from 10 minutes to 20 minutes.
Wow, that's impressive.
I think so too, but it took me a long time.
That's how long did it take you to get to that point?
It took me years.
Yeah, like 1 minute for most people is intolerable.
Way too much.
3 is like you're a true he-man or she-woman if you can do 3 minutes.
Yeah. Well, what happened was we had an office in Moscow for many years, and whenever we'd be there working, my friends or clients would take me to the Russian bathhouses, the real traditional ones, and if you didn't do their cold plunges, that was it. I mean, why would I use you as a nutritionist?
Correct.
So that got me to look at how the Finns use cold plunges when they do Finnish saunas. And then that led me to the studies on cold water swimmers. That eventually led me to Wim Hof. And here we are. You know, it's either cryotherapy or ice baths.
Beautiful, beautiful. And do you do a type of Wim Hof breathing to kind of endure that kind of cold in order to build?
When you're in there, I go quiet.
Yeah.
You know, Wim, I think, has it tricked out so that you do a certain, you know, his breathing technique. I go real quiet. I put on some yoga nidra meditation from YouTube on my Alexa, and it's kind of like, don't talk in your head.
Yeah, because when I'm doing cold therapy, I go down to Bulletproof, for example, to jump in the cryo.
There you go.
Like, you want music? And I'm like, no, I want to be with my breath.
There you go.
Now, do you separate? Is there a point where you're separating from the sensation of the cold in that moment?
Oh, you disassociate at a certain point.
There's a point where you kind of like, you feel the cold coming on, but then you can go into the breath or your mind. And then now that's an external. And then there's a point where you kind of can wobble back to the cold, or you can kind of go beyond. Do you know when that kicks in for you?
Yeah, I'm very clear. And in almost instinctual at this point, it's kind of like, I know it's over, right? Like today was 10 minutes, today was 15, today was 20, and I get it. But it's part of the whole process. So again, I'm looking for different portholes to regulate what's going on with my body so that I can maintain biological autonomy as the years go on. Okay, this sounds like a lot of nonsense, or this sounds like it could be useful. Let me do a search, or maybe reach out to you or Dave, whatever, and get the feedback that I may require and either incorporate it or not.
Beautifully said. I mean, that's really great. So we're out of the bath. You've done your 10, 20 minutes.
Oh, right? That's it. Then I'll turn on my phone. Then the Wi-Fi goes on, right?
You shut the Wi-Fi off at night?
Yeah, it goes off. And same thing. There are nights where I'm not going to turn it off. I'm going to keep it so that I can watch Netflix. But for the most part, I'd say 3-4 nights a week it goes off. Phone has to go off, right? And that's not where I'm all that crazy. But still, I recognize the difference that it does make.
Okay, so now we get out of that and you're on with your day, you're pounding back your shake with all your wonderful goodies. Then what happens in the run of your day?
It used to be a real typical anxiety-filled day. Right? So everything's a crisis.
You take coffee?
No. Not that I haven't slipped over the years. But in terms of my day-to-day reality, I'd rather have a nice big scoop of matcha tea in my smoothie or my beverage. That gives me enough caffeine. I do like caffeine. I'll be very frank.
Just the right amount with enough theanine to kind of offset it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Caffeine anhydrous, which is in some of the supplements that I use. So it's kind of like I'm staying within a certain range. As much as I'd love to have coffee, it does make me crash later in the day. Different for different people.
Yes.
It
depends if you're how you metabolize caffeine, if you're a slow metabolizer, fast metabolizer. But you told me your story beforehand that, it was like coffee from where you grew up. It's like,
oh yeah,
10 o'clock, espressos at 10 o'clock at night.
Well, once I fell out of the habit in the 70s, Then whenever I'd have it, I'd crash. So I realized that must have played a role over the years in my problems with energy, my problems with my mood. That was the first time in my life where I really experienced just really clean, clear moods for long periods of time. Once I started fasting and once I started to do water fasting, the clarity of mind was indescribable, you know, and it solved a lot of issues for me. So same thing, you know, talking about fasting, intermittent fasting, I think is really critical. The day itself now is very well planned. I don't use a computer. I tend to plan the evening before or as soon as I get into the office. And I use a pencil, an eraser, and a pad. All right.
I love it. So I keep my paper and
There you go.
I'm an old school guy that way. I find if I write it, I seem to be able to recall, or it makes a bigger impression. Even if I don't go back and read what I wrote, it makes a deeper impression.
Huge difference. And whenever, and I must have gone through, I don't know, 100 apps over the years to manage your time better. And I never use them, you know, so there are people that are better disposed to that. I'm not one of them. And then we kind of we planned out how my schedule should be for the week in terms of who I'm going to talk to, when do I get my outdoor break. Everybody's got to get outdoors at some point. When not to be answering emails. It used to be a game, you know, like email zero. Okay, another 20K minutes. And to get, you know, break that habit and make sure that I'm unsubscribed and get as much off. I think that's been really critical in garnering some more peace of mind. I don't have notifications on, so I'm not bothered during the day. I do check in for texts, and I'd say about every hour, mainly because my clients have my number, and I got to see what's going on. So I can walk out at the end of the day, you know, in I would say innervated state, not enervated. I'm not wiped out and complaining, and I got to go to Lincoln Center and get a bottle of wine, and oh my God, you know, like let me think about how hard my day was. You know, it's like, oh my God, you know, like I'm gonna go home and journal, work on something for a while. It's a great movie I want to see. I got to dive into this particular book. So it's again, I think, an aspect of maturation, emotional intelligence, overriding my impulsiveness. You know, I'd much rather go have the bottle of Chardonnay. And you know, it's been years that I would allow myself to be driven that way. You know, so the days tend to be much more rewarding now. And again, I think a lot of it has to do with you know, my age and where I'm at, how it is that my thinking has evolved. My capacity, though, is not all that different than it may have been about 30 years ago.
Fascinating.
Right, but that's part of the biohacking. A lot of what it is that we're doing.
Right. Now, what time would you start winding out of your workday and maybe into your more, I would say, introspective or educational pursuits?
As soon as possible. As soon as you and I are done, I already know exactly what I've got planned. You know, I'm going to read for a while. I got to get up real early tomorrow, and I'm surprised that that's the way it is. Whereas it used to be like, you know, what chick am I going to meet? Where we're going to dinner? You know, got a wine, and that was life in New York. That's the way it was.
So what does the evening look like? And is there any nutritional supplements that you like to use in the evening? Because we kind of got we got you dialed into the kind of the perfect zone with your practices, and you got nuded up, as we like to say, and you went about your day, you dealt with your clients, did your workload. Now you're kind of shifting into the evening mode. What happens then?
Magnesium taurate, magnesium glycinate, ashwagandha, bacopa, L-serine, a little bit of picamelon, which is a combination of niacin and GABA, super omega-3. That's a combination of fish oil, krill oil, sesame seed oil, and sesame lignans. There's a new extract of a particular fruit that I've been asked to look at that actually is supposed to improve muscle function. And I'm not convinced yet, but that's in with the mix. Oh, L-glycine on its own, separate from magnesium glycinate. I take carnosine at night, not during the daytime.
Oh, interesting.
All right. I take phosphatidylserine also at nighttime. Seems to work a lot better. Small amount of B6 to improve the quality of my sleep. Magnolia, poppy seed extract. That pretty much does it. It's kind of like a small cup filled with supplements, but I'm very accustomed to it. It may take me as I'm winding down about an hour to get them all down.
Right. And then what time would it be lights out for you?
Tonight it's probably going to be early because, like I told you, it's going to be an early day tomorrow. So we're at about 6:30. I'd say probably by about 8:30 today.
Okay, so you're in bed early, up early. So you're
yes.
I think in the chronotypes, it's a lion.
well, the way it was for me, it used to be like 12, 1, 2, and then up at 6 or 7. Who cares if you're tired?
Right. That's the New York life, right?
Yeah, do an ice bath, take some bromontine, a couple of other nootropics that are just going to push you through, and you're like,
let's just ride the New York wave, right?
Like Bob Fosse used to do it, like, I'm here.
So let's bring this all together, because I think it's safe to say that we're emerging into a new paradigm of humanity. And I'm a big fan of, I read Yuval Noah Harari's Sapiens and 21 Lessons for the 21st Century and Homo Deus or Homo Deus, whichever.
Remarkable.
Very, very interesting books. And he categorized either like we're in this evolutionary shift. And I think that's very true. And what's maybe different about this one than maybe previous adaptations. So Charles, to go back to Darwinian theory, Darwin said that he didn't actually say it's survival of the most fittest. He said it's survival of the most adaptable.
There you go.
And I always love his reference to the blue-footed booby bird, which was the most adaptable bird. And I thought that's really, it stuck with me. But traditionally, other than tribal warfare, which certainly was definitely a genetic influencer.
That's correct.
It's much of what we dealt with as humans were environmental components that were influencing us. But what's interesting now in the rapid technological advancement, particularly since World War II, the splitting of the atom changed everything. Now we have the ability to not just annihilate the tribe next to us, but just annihilate everything.
Yes.
Which leads certainly ethical and moralistic and philosophical components. But then we have also to contend with the identity of the fusion, as Elon Musk says, we're already cybernetic organisms. We just haven't fully completed the attachment. And then we have the transhumanists that are emerging saying, whether it's the Kurzweilian folks that says the singularity is unavoidable and happening very soon, certain themes. And then we have genetic manipulation, where we are actually actively mutating the species with CRISPR genes. There's people doing this right now today. And then we have a whole cascade of, I would say, homo biologists, homo digitalis, and I believe there's another avenue, which is homo spirituality or spiritus. Where do you think that you fit in, and where do you see this all going?
I think the last category, very much so. That doesn't mean that I'm anti-technology in any way at all. I've got great admiration for Elon Musk. That's not the game that I'm interested in playing at all. There may have been a time when I would have, but he's fascinating to watch. Mm-hmm. And certainly you can see possibility in terms of where some human beings are going. in reading Harari's work, I was very inspired, in terms of our history, where we began, how it all began, and where it's at and where it's going. Um, listening to him lecture and talk, certainly being a great fan of Sam Harris and reading everything by Sam and listening to just about everything he has to talk about, I recognize that I fall into that last category. So you can be on the neuroscientific side, right, and listen to some of the great minds out of Stanford, and at the same time maintain a spiritual core, knowing that you don't know all that much. Kind of like what we said before, like as I get older, I'm amazed that I used to be such a know-it-all, and took pride in that, and I know many people would say, well, there's a degree of insincerity in saying that he doesn't know anything. The fact is, I don't, and that gives me a lot of room to express my curiosity, and have these terrific conversations where, you and I can ping pong back and forth, and just about anything can pop up in the conversation, and then go with that. So I've got optimism about what I'm noticing, the growing movement within plant medicine, what's occurring there, what people are discovering for themselves, how it is that soldiers returning from Afghanistan and the wars in Iraq are treating themselves with everything from MDMA to psilocybin to ayahuasca. I'm like, wow, and the fact that ketamine is being used to deal with PTSD also. So I've got a lot of faith in that too, and watching how many people are moving over to the good side, right? And like I said, I don't know how much more time I may have left, based on whatever my genetics have baked into my battery pack, but I'm going to take my chances with that.
So what does the future look like directly for you as opposed to humanity at large? Because you're doing so many things that have contributed to the world of, I would say, healthy, optimal aging. You've
Right.
been a voice for many, many years, and certainly a trendsetter, as evidenced by your incredible array of work. Being a futurist in the past, it's hard for you to separate that again. And so at this stage, what do you see for yourself happening in the next 10, 20, 30 years or beyond?
It was funny. Over the weekend, somebody asked a question not unsimilar to that, Wade. And I thought to myself, wouldn't it be great if you went and you spent a year or two in an ashram? The fact that occurred to me at all, like a Zen Buddhist retreat, maybe here in the States or outside of the country, that wouldn't have occurred to me 5 years ago, let alone a year ago.
Well, that's the three stages, classical stages in Indian philosophy, right? You start your training under the guidance of the spiritual teacher, and then you develop a craft and a capability, and you go into the world and you make your mark in the world or raise a family. And then once
Yes.
you get rid of that, you go off into the forest, into deeper contemplation about the whole thing, which leads me to the next phase.
But I do want to point something out to you in that regard. I'm being very sincere. In other words, the thought appealed to me, not like, I'll never get to see, Africa. It was more like, wow, well, like what would it take? Sit down, get online, what would it take to spend 6 months in a retreat with Jack Kornfield? So things like that are really on my mind. I think working on consciousness more, and the intersection of neuroscience and spirituality right there.
I love it, and I'm right in that lockstep with that side of things. And so if you can, one of the contemplations that I think is very important for people to engage in, and so many people in the West think it is macabre, but I think it's an essential component to living, and that is the contemplation of the cessation of one's own physical existence.
Yeah.
And it brings up a variety of anxieties, of course, and, but we all have to face that at some point. And I think it's something that's common later in life, but I think the sooner that one does it, the more one can live life through its whole thing, because it's kind of like the thing that no one wants to deal, especially in the West, because we don't really deal with death the way that we deal with it in other parts of the world. Like if you're walking down the street in India, death is everywhere. If you're living in the Middle East and you're in a war-torn country, or in, Central Africa, where you're just, the horrors of the human condition are, it strikes me so ironically how many people are living in the most technologically fruitful, productive, vibrant place in the world, and they're paralyzed with fear from a propagation of information from things, and they've completely shut their lives down, hoping to worried about their death. And it's like, well, why don't you just contemplate your death and then start beginning from life there? My point being,
that's a very good point.
In your opinion, is consciousness, how would you relate consciousness to yourself? And how would you see that transition?
I'm very reconciled to that I won't be here someday. That I've worked through, and it kind of just showed up one day. Not like some revelation. I was just aware that, I'm out of here too. Maybe probably after losing my dad, that became a greater reality. A mother, being a student of history, recognizing that there have been great empires, remarkable people that have lived, and they're all gone. Everybody's out of here. So at some point, and I suspect plant medicine has also made a big difference in this, I became aware, after a while, I was just okay with it. I just wasn't all that disturbed by it. Whereas you and I both know, when we're in our, the height of our youth, it's like, we're going to be around here forever. These days, it's why so much time goes into taking advantage of almost every moment. How it is that I fill it up is because I am aware now of something ticking a little bit quicker. Days seem to go by quicker, evenings go by quicker. I can't believe the time that it is at the time that I started this morning. And we are part of a culture where people don't look to reconcile themselves with their finitude, the fact that it will end. I don't know if you asked me if I'm interested if things go on afterwards. Had you asked me that question 6 years ago, I would have said, no, just ends. Now, I really don't know. With much of what I've done in the past 5 or 6 years, I do wonder now. And that, I think, is a much better place than when I was in before.
Do you feel that there's to me, I've reframed biological optimization, or the biohacking community, whatever it is. And there's so many people who I think are looking at it from, how long can I live? Like, you see these common wild statements. I want to live to 150. And I was asked this not so long ago on a podcast with Matt, myself, and Dave asked, they were all kind of putting in what they felt they were going to live. And I threw up some.
Dave wants to live for forever. He doesn't even have a car. He has a Sherman tank.
Yeah. And I threw up a number in the conversation, and I instantly felt insincere about it when I said it.
Okay.
I feel like I got to throw up a remarkable number because I just got blown out of the water by my business partner and Dave.
There you go.
But recent events, I had a very powerful spiritual experience not that long ago. And what I recognized is that maybe biological optimization is to prepare oneself for an active transition where one is anticipating going through the door as opposed to dreading it.
It's very funny you would say that. I've made a joke out of the fact that I want to be biologically optimized enough to be running Central Park in my 90s or early hundreds and just drop dead on the horse track, right? So that's what I would want the biooptimization for. I can still get that last run out. That's going to get me to heaven.
Paul Bragg.
There you go.
Got taken out surfing.
Yeah, absolutely. And
Franco Colombo drowned in the
96,
ocean. So,
out in Hawaii.
Oz, this has been amazing. I'm going to leave it at that, I think. Can you share it with people where they can reach out and find some of your latest writings and, of course, all of the work that you've done? You've been such a great contributor to this industry, and I look forward to many, many decades to come.
Me too. I got to come visit you when I'm out there. They can start looking at more, look me up on Instagram, Facebook. I think I'm going to fire up again. I'm beginning to post my essays on medium.com at Oz Life Now. They tend to be a little bit on the dark side. so warning in that regard. And of course, my website, ozgarcia.com.
Always a pleasure. Conversations are great.
Same here. That was terrific.
Can't wait till we do this in person. I look forward to it.
Me too.
And for all our listeners today, I want to thank you for joining us. I hope that we dove a little bit deeper than the normal conversations, but with such a wise and experienced man, I just am grateful that you are sharing your thoughts, your feelings, and where you are and where that could lead some of us as we are on our journey, this thing called life.
Thanks, Wade. I'll see you soon. I send you a lot of love, bro.
You got it.
At Bioptimizers, our mission is to fix digestion. And a cornerstone of digestion is gut flora. P3OM is our patented probiotic formula. In fact, we call it the Navy SEALs of probiotics. You see, strong proteolytic or protein digesting activity is paramount to having a healthy gut flora. And of course, P3OM provides that. The good news is, unlike weaker probiotics, P3OM survives the digestion process. What it does is it basically multiplies the good guys while protecting you against pathogens, or what some people call the bad guys. P3OM really helps to rebuild your digestion. And what that allows you to do is to maximize nutrient uptake, energy, and metabolism. To find out more of how P3OM can help you, go to www.bioptimizers.com.
Thank you for listening to the Bioptimizers Awesome Health Podcast. You can find more information at bioptimizers.com.